Hi, I'm Lenora Bresler. Welcome to the February 3rd, 2017 edition of The Bible, Delight in the Details. We've been looking at how to study a Bible passage, and we're coming to the end of that series with a mini-series within that of biblical archaeology and how biblical archaeology brings credence and clarity and validation to many major aspects of the Bible. Now, it is true that biblical archaeology does not prove all of the claims of the Bible, but it certainly does prove some of them. You see, as in opposition to what the myths of Greek and Rome and other ancient religions do, the Bible is grounded in references to actual historical events, personages, and locations. It's nothing like once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away. No, it is peopled with historical figures that history and now archaeology are unearthing and giving extra biblical or other than just the Bible validation and confirmation of these people, events, and locations. So when you study a Bible passage, you should ask yourself, is there anything that has been unearthed that would give additional credence to this passage? Now, we're going to take several days talking about some of the most fascinating discoveries that has happened in the field of archaeology. Today, I want to talk about some of the most well-known, although not necessarily my personal favorites. So you'll want to be sure to tune in over the next couple days. Probably the best example of where biblical archaeology has really validated the Bible when it was under great attack has to do with a people known as the Hittites. There are over 50 references to the Hittites in the Old Testament. They are presented in the Bible as being one of a group of peoples that rose to power sometime about the 14th, 15th, 16th century BC, and they are a very warlike people that the people of Israel struggled against, as well as their neighbors as well. We hear about all kinds of things, including treaties with some of the neighboring countries and warring expeditions. Now, it's not just that they're talked about in general. There are specific Hittites that are discussed in the Bible, and some pretty important Hittites as well. For example, Esau, was married someone who is described as a Hittite. And if you remember the story of David and Bathsheba, Bathsheba's husband was Uriah the Hittite. So a pretty important group and seen throughout the Bible. Now, before 1876, skeptics ridiculed the Bible about this. They said that there was absolutely no evidence of any kind that there was such a group as the Hittites, much less someone powerful enough to warrant all of these references in the Bible. And so it was poo-pooed as, well, clearly this is just fiction, made up. But then in 1876 and following, not only were there archaeological digs about the Hittites uncovering this hitherto unknown, except through the Bible, people, but they became really a focal point on a lot of history. I remember growing up and reading about the Hittites, studying about them in my public school history curriculum. We have found the capital city of the Hittites, and it turns out that the Hittites rose to power very quickly because of advances that they had with regard to weapons, particularly iron. And now it appears that the Hittites were actually marks a demarcation line between the Bronze and the Iron Ages. And so they're a big deal, not just in the Bible. Who'd have thunk it? Now, there's another very interesting archaeological discovery, and that is about Jericho. You remember the story? It was the first major battle under Joshua as the people of Israel were going into the Promised Land. And they had to take Jericho because it was the gateway to the rest of Canaan. You remember the story. God told them to walk once every day for 6 days around the outskirts of this highly fortified, very strong walled city. And then they were to, on the 7th day, go 7 times around and then shout, and the walls would come tumbling down. And indeed, that's what the Bible says they did. Again, so many people, just skeptics, saying that could never happen. How silly you would, what a silly thought. Well, archaeological digs at Jericho show that there is indeed a layer in the chronology of the dig, of the ruins at Jericho, that show that the walls actually did collapse all at the same time and inward, which gives understanding to the biblical passage that says that when the people of Israel went into the city, they went in and up. Well, you bet they went up over the ruins, over the walls that had collapsed inside. Also, we're told that the city was completely burned. And guess what? At that level, the walls and all the ruins are charred as if there had been a mammoth conflagration. Now, sometimes, I will tell you, be on the lookout, because skeptics will say, oh, well, maybe, yes, there was a level at Jericho that seems to correspond with the biblical passage. However, it's in the wrong time frame. Anytime about Jericho or anything else where you have someone who is calling into question something that appears to be kind of evident that archaeological evidence has unearthed, and they're saying that there's a problem with the time, be aware of something. When you're talking about dating things about the ancient world, it's all based on the Egyptian dynasties and the Egyptian chronology. A lot of people have staked a lot of their reputation on that chronology being accurate. And anything that calls that into question is an absolute threat on a lot of people, Egyptologists. But there is, nonetheless, a growing group of scholars and evidence that is being unearthed to call into question whether that timeline of the Egyptian dynasties is accurate. If it is wrong, as many scholars now are increasingly believing, it could be off by about 300 to 500 years. If you skew everything by that amount of time, a lot of these things, including the fall of Jericho, comes completely correct and becomes completely believable and chronologically appropriate. So keep that in mind. One last thing that you bringing it forward even closer, something you may remember about 4 or 5 years ago, something was unearthed, a box that was a funeral box, and the name Caiaphas was written on it. It was found in Jerusalem. You may remember that Caiaphas was the high priest who schemed to have Christ crucified. Now, is this the Caiaphas? Is that the same one? Maybe, maybe not. But it's very likely that his funeral box would have been preserved in some way at the time. That was a family that had multiple generations of high priests involved. This was a great ruling family in Jerusalem. And it also reminds us of what happened in burials during the time of Jesus. What would happen is you would have a family tomb, vault. It was usually just a cave with a stone literally rolled across it, just like the Bible talks about with Jesus. There would be a stone bed. The body would be laid on that stone bed. And then, over the course of 6 months to a year, the body would deteriorate. About a year or so after the death, the family would go in and collect the bones, all that was left now of the remains, and put them in an ossuary box. That was the funeral box. That way, the tomb could be reused for the next member of the family to die. It is therefore not at all shocking that these boxes of prominent Jewish families, including possibly Caiaphas, the high priest, would actually be preserved. I hope you've enjoyed this look at how archaeology can validate certain aspects of the Bible. Join me over the next couple days for perhaps less well-known, but in my mind, even more spectacular discoveries, including the location of the Garden of Eden and Joseph, evidence of Joseph in Egypt. I'm Lenora Bresler. Visit me tomorrow on The Bible, Delight in the Details. Have a great day.